everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. I appreciate all of the words of encouragement and donations that you guys have flooded me with over the past 24 hours. Right now, nothing has happened to us. I'm still in the same spot creating content. And when the season starts, I know that I'm going to be able to elevate this platform to the level that I feel it can reach. Just need the season to hurry up and get here. And as of right now, we are only 4 weekends away until the college football season kicking off. And no quarterback in the history of college football, I feel, has received more hype in the offseason than what Arch Manning has. Why is Arch Manning getting so much hype despite Texas refusing to start him over Quinn Ewers last year? And the simple answer is politics. You see, oftentimes in football, you can have the better player sitting behind a player that isn't as good as him for several different reasons. Rather it be the guy above him getting paid more NIL money, or the coach having more loyalty to that guy to where he's willing to tolerate him not playing his best football simply because he has a certain link and a certain bond to him. And that's the case with Steve Sarkisian starting Quinn Ewers over Arch Manning. Despite going into the playoffs, it felt like Arch Manning had overexceeded how good Quinn Ewers was. And if he would have started during Texas' playoff run, maybe they would have won the national championship. But you have to remember that when Steve Sarkisian first got to Texas, who was the quarterback that he got that helped turn Texas around? Who was the quarterback that helped put Texas somewhat back on the map? It was Quinn Ewers. And Quinn Ewers has been a really solid starting quarterback for Texas. It wasn't like he was completely doo-doo. It's just that he wasn't as good for what he was hyped up to be coming out of high school. He was one of the highest rated quarterbacks in the history of the recruiting rankings. And injuries played a large part in Quinn Ewers' erratic play. The guy was never able to stay healthy for the entirety of a season. And in his first game ever going up against Alabama, the guy looked like he was going to be one of the greatest quarterbacks in college football history of how he played in the first half of that game. But after that injury, he just never really looked like the same player. He was scared and got happy feet anytime he got a little bit of pressure on him. His pocket awareness wasn't the greatest because he didn't trust his offensive line despite having the best offensive line in college football over the past 2 seasons. But Steve Sarkisian stayed committed to Arch Manning because he felt he owed him loyalty. And when Arch Manning committed to play for Texas, the Manning family didn't necessarily want him to start as soon as possible. Arch went to Texas because his family wanted him to sit and learn behind Quinn Ewers for a few seasons so he can better increase his chances of having a successful career and eventually being put in a situation where he'll go to the NFL ready to dominate instantly. And sometimes the best quarterbacks in the history of college football didn't always start as true freshmen. If anything, more guys are starting as true freshmen now than what they were decades ago. Let's not forget that Tim Tebow sat behind Chris Leak, even though you could have made the argument that Tim Tebow, as soon as he walked on campus, was a better quarterback than what Chris Leak was. But loyalty is a true thing. Politicking is what I like to call it. Politicking is when variables outside of on-the-field play dictate who gets the most playing time. And Arch Manning didn't start over Quinn Ewers because of the politicking that Steve Sarkisian was doing, because he just felt like he owed Quinn Ewers to have the right to finish out his career as a starter, in spite of him probably not being better than what Arch Manning was. If Arch Manning would have started during Texas' playoff run last year, there's a strong possibility that maybe the outcome of how their season ended would have been completely different. Because we only have seen a small sample size out of Arch Manning. He played 2 games against inferior competition, but he looked pretty flipping good in those games. And the differences between Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers is that Arch Manning is going to be way better at generating explosive plays than what Quinn Ewers was. Quinn Ewers wasn't the guy that pushed the football down the field that often. Arch Manning is more aggressive in that category. You also have somebody who's going to be better handling those blitzes, because Arch Manning, he'll sit there, take a big hit, and deliver a dime downfield. We didn't really see Quinn Ewers do that much. But even if Arch Manning is this great quarterback that he's hyped up to be, him starting over Quinn Ewers last season was never supposed to happen, because that was never the plan for him. It was always planned for him to sit and wait his turn. Arch Manning could have went to several other universities. He could have transferred and started at the majority of P4 schools out there, and yet he chose to wait his turn at the University of Texas, because him and his family believe that him sitting and learning, being able to be coached by the best offensive mind in the sport right now, Steve Sarkisian, is what was best for his career. And it's kind of puzzling how folks are going to use Arch Manning not starting early in his career against them, when a guy who transfers left and right looking for a starting opportunity gets a bunch of criticism. And then you have the question, what happened to loyalty? What happened to guys willing to wait their turn? But you have somebody in Arch Manning who did things the right way. He was developed behind the scenes. He was developed in practice, and he's on the bench trying to soak up as much knowledge as possible, so when it is his turn to get the keys to the Lamborghini, like he is right now, he's better suited, that has success, because he's seen a guy in Quinn Ewers that has done it at a pretty consistent level, although not the highest level of times. It helps to be a young player, to have somebody that can mentor you, that you can learn how to prepare. Because if Arch Manning would have started his true freshman season and he wasn't good, then all of a sudden he gets a bunch of hate, he gets called overrated, and his career outlook is viewed completely different as what it is right now. And we've seen guys like Mac Jones wait their turn, and eventually when it was their opportunity to start, they made the most of it. So Arch Manning not starting over Quinn Ewers last season, I don't really think that that's a fair criticism. There are plenty of all-time greats that didn't start right out the gate. It was always planned for Arch Manning to sit and wait his turn, and Quinn Ewers, Steve Sarkisian allowed him to have the ability to get the right send-off for what he did for the University of Texas, as far as bringing the Longhorns back to national prominence, making them a national championship contender again. And he always will be honored by Longhorn Nation for the commitment that he had to that program. When he could have transferred, instead of opting to declare for the NFL draft, he decided that I wanted to go out as a Texas Longhorn. I want to be remembered as the starting quarterback for several seasons at the University of Texas. And that's what Steve Sarkisian gave him the ability to do, and that's why he decided to declare for the draft. There's too much worrying about the tough schedule that Florida has entering this season. Everybody in the SEC plays a hard schedule. Even if you have a relatively weak schedule for SEC standards, you still are going to have to play some of the best teams in this conference. And what makes the SEC the toughest conference in college football is that there's not a wide gap between the top teams in this conference and the worst teams in this conference. We saw Ole Miss lose to Kentucky, who was the worst team in the SEC last year. Vanderbilt and Oklahoma beat Alabama. Alabama was 4-1, 5-1 against ranked teams last year, but they played their worst football against teams that they were expected to beat. That shows you how good the SEC is in terms of quality depth. On any given Saturday, anybody can fall in this conference, no matter how talented they may be, to teams that they out-roster on paper. And Florida is going into this season being top 10 and returning starters. They have a lot of experience on defense. They have an experienced offensive line. So they're battle tested. They beat LSU and Ole Miss back-to-back last year, ended both of those two teams' playoff hopes respectively. So with the tough schedule that they have entering this season, it shouldn't really be a deterrent from them making it to the college football playoffs. If anything, if they're able to survive this gauntlet, it further shows that the growth that this program has made under Billy Napier and Florida's ability to punch up with some of the best teams in college football. Because there's not a single team on Florida's schedule this year that they don't have the ability to beat, especially with DJ Lagway entering his second season as this team's starting quarterback. Last year, when he finished full games, he was 6-1 as a starter. This was a completely different team when DJ Lagway took over. And when you have a quarterback that's the generational talent that DJ Lagway is, he's able to elevate the guys around him. Florida can beat LSU and Miami in those road games that they have back-to-back. They can beat Texas at home in the swamp. Playing in the swamp is one of the toughest places to get a win at. And if there's any team that has the ability to pull off an upset against Texas in spite of how stacked and loaded they are, it's Florida. Texas A&M. They owe Texas A&M 1-4. How Texas A&M came into their trap and completely dog-walked them and bullied them. And Texas A&M, I don't feel like they have a better team than what Florida has this year. You can beat Georgia this year. I've said it all this offseason that the gap has closed between Georgia and Florida this year. Before DJ Lagway got hurt, Florida was getting right with Georgia. And even with their third-string quarterback in the game, they still had an opportunity to win it up until the final 6 minutes when Georgia just completely ran away with the game. Ole Miss, Tennessee are going to have down seasons. FSU is going to be nothing better than an 8-win team. Florida has a really good team this year that has a bunch of veteran experience to where having a tough schedule isn't going to hurt this team. As what Billy Napier is saying, just spot the ball. Florida can beat Texas. Spot the ball and let's see it happen. Florida can beat Georgia. Spot the ball and let's see it happen. Just because Florida has a tough schedule doesn't mean that they are not going to be able to make it to the college football playoffs. Their floor is 8 wins. Their ceiling is going 10-2. I predict that Florida is going to finish 9-3, and if they can get an upset against Texas or Georgia, which they have a strong chance of being able to do, they can easily go 10-2, find themselves competing for the SEC championship this year. Having a tough schedule is not going to stop Florida from having a breakout season year 4 under Billy Napier. A huge reason why he was brought back was mainly due to how good a bunch of the younger players on Florida's roster played. 70% of Florida's NIL money is tied into guys like Jaden Ball and DJ Lagway. And Billy Napier had these guys playing incredibly good football in spite of the amount of starters that they lost early during the season. Now you have guys who were able to get early playing time, a much earlier rate than what was expected. So now you got guys that have a bunch of snaps under their belt, and that experience is going to help Florida survive this brutal schedule. They also have better team chemistry than most of the top teams in the SEC this year. There are a bunch of teams that have to dive really deep into the transfer portal this year. Florida isn't really one of them. And when you have a team that returns this much production on both sides of the football, it means that they should start the season really hot as compared to a team like Miami, who, although they are really talented, it's going to take a while for the guys on that roster to gel. When you're building a team through the transfer portal, you're going to have to rebuild that chemistry incredibly fast. When you have a new offensive line mainly composed as transfers, the communication isn't going to be as good right out the gate, because the best offensive lines in football, like what you see Florida, have a bunch of guys who have started a lot of games with each other. Same thing with good secondaries. When you have a good secondary, guys have to be on the same page in terms of being able to communicate effectively so you don't see a bunch of busted coverages. Florida returns a bunch of experience this year that makes this schedule not as tough as what it looks. And every year, there are teams that are expected to be good that end up disappointing, and there are teams that nobody expects to be that good that end up surprising folks. So you can't look at Florida's schedule before the season starts and say it's it's going to be impossible for this to be a playoff team, because a lot of these teams that are getting a bunch of hype that are in the top 25 won't be as good when the season starts. And I'm throwing some indirect shots at Tennessee and Ole Miss. Both of those two teams are due to have regression this year because of what they lose from last year's team, especially Ole Miss going all in on making it to the playoffs. Florida can beat any team on their schedule this year. Just spot the ball and let's see these games get played, because with the talent they have, the experience they have, and the turnaround that Billy Napier was able to manufacture early last season after those losses to Miami and Texas A&M shows that Florida is battle tested. Having a schedule this difficult isn't going to stop them from being able to be a possible participant in the college football playoffs this year. If they can just get the 9 wins, that's good enough to get them in. Heck, they wanted to put Alabama in the playoffs as a 3-loss team. Same thing with Ole Miss, but their losses that they suffered were so bad that it was hard to put them in. But if Florida, let's say their only 3 losses come to LSU, Miami, and Georgia, then they're going to get in the playoffs just off how tough this schedule is in terms of ranked teams and level of difficulty. But in the SEC, there is no duck and no smoke. So it doesn't really matter if Florida had an easy schedule on paper or the hard schedule that they have right now, because the SEC just has a bunch of good quality teams every single year. So no matter if you have somewhat of an easy schedule where you avoid playing the top 6 finishers in this conference from last year, there's guys who could finish in the bottom of the SEC like Auburn that end up being good this year. So I just believe that there's too much worrying over how difficult Florida's schedule is. They're good enough to compete with anybody in college football this year, and I got the Gators finishing 9-3 with the possibility of going 10-2. Memphis offered $200 million to the Big 12 to get membership into their conference, and unfortunately, $200 million was not enough for the Big 12 to allow Memphis in. And Memphis is a respectable program, both in basketball and football. Their football program has had back-to-back double-digit winning seasons. They finished ranked 25th in the final college football playoff rankings. They got a pretty good NIL backing. They're supported by FedEx. So with everything that Memphis has, why is it that $200 million wasn't enough to get them entrance into the Big 12 conference? Because it's not as if the Big 12 is like the Big 10 or the SEC. It kind of is just the best that you can get if you're unable to get into the Power 2 conferences in college football. And you would have thought that the Big 12 would have opened Memphis with open arms, because Memphis is a respectable program. But from a Big 12 standpoint, it makes a good amount of sense why they didn't want to allow Memphis in, because for one, Memphis is a small market team. They don't really have a huge fan base. They don't really have a huge donor base like what UCF, BYU, and Houston had when they got accepted and they got invited into the Big 12 a few years ago after the conference realignment moves that the SEC made, getting Texas and Oklahoma, and the Big 10 acquiring some of the best teams from the West Coast. Houston, BYU, all are located in really favorable media markets. And BYU is a religious school, so they have an incredibly large fan base that's not just located in the U.S., but just globally BYU has a lot of fans, and UCF is located in Orlando, which is a really good touring destination, and they have over 70,000 students on campus and a huge alumni, one of, if not the largest alumni in America. Memphis was not like any of those three teams that got invited into the Big 12 when they initially started to realign their conference. Now, your only fair comparison to a recent new member of the Big 12 compared to Memphis is Cincinnati, because Cincinnati isn't really in a big market. But remember, at the time that Cincinnati first got invited to the Big 12, they weren't too far away removed from being the first G5 team at the time to get into the college football playoffs, which was only 4 teams at that point. So the projection of Cincinnati ceiling was a lot higher than what it is now with them not having Luke Fickell. Memphis, on the other hand, yeah, they've been a really good program. They've won double-digit games back-to-back seasons, but they haven't really made a lot of noise from a national standpoint. And the Big 12 doesn't view Memphis as a big enough draw that increases the value of the conference. You see, adding BYU, UCF, Houston, Utah, Colorado, all those teams increase the value of the Big 12. Plus, the Big 12 isn't as desperate now for teams as what they were 2-3 years ago, because when the first big moves of conference realignment were made by the SEC and the Big 10, the Big 12 was just trying to get whoever to survive. If Memphis would have offered $200 million to get into the Big 12 in 2021, 2022, they more than likely would have gotten into the conference. But now with the Big 12 already pretty solid and not really as unstable as what it was a few years ago, there really isn't no need to just accept anybody that you can. And the ACC is on the brink of getting ready to implode. Clemson and FSU are already trying to get out of the conference. And there's a strong chance by the time we get to 2028 that both of those programs will be free agents. And rather they go to the Big 10 or the SEC, there will be a domino effect when you see schools like Miami, North Carolina follow suit as well and get out of the ACC. And when the ACC implodes, the Big 12 wants to be that conference who gets the scraps from the remainder of the teams in that conference. So there's no point in getting Memphis when you can get better teams that can increase your conference's value when the ACC eventually ends up completely collapsing. Memphis, right now, despite the improvements that they've made to their facilities and the NIL department, they still are nothing better than a top-tier G5 program, similar to Boise State. Boise State, as consistently good as what they've been from a G5 standpoint, they don't move the needle in terms of viewership. They don't move the needle in terms of bringing a different audience to the Big 12. The Big 12 can now afford to be selective with who they invite and who they allow membership into the conference. And also, if you're willing to pay $200 million for membership into the conference, it kind of is a red flag because it shows that you're desperate. And why is Memphis desperate to get into a Power 4 conference? Because Memphis knows that the formation of college football Super League is coming sooner rather than later. And when you do have that happen, you're only going to have 3 power conferences in the sport. You're going to have the ACC, who's going to be gone. So whoever goes to the Big 10, the SEC, like Clemson, FSU, Miami, and North Carolina, the Big 12 is going to get the remainder of those schools, and essentially it'll be the Big 3. You'll have the Big 12, you'll have the SEC, and you'll have the Big 10. And then you'll just have everybody else. Memphis doesn't want to be in that category of everybody else because they know if they are, the G5 is essentially going to be irrelevant because they're not going to have a guaranteed spot. of getting into the playoffs. They're not going to get as much revenue as what they could get in one of those big power conferences as what they currently are getting right now. Right now, Big 12 teams get compensated $31 million per season due to the new $200-something billion media rights deal that they recently agreed upon. And the AAC, the American Athletic Conference, or I should say the American Conference, since they rebranded to that, you only get $7 million per season in that conference. And being in a conference like the Big 12, although it isn't as prestigious as what the Big 10 and the SEC are, you still get more visibility playing in the Big 12 than what you do in the American Conference. Because if you're playing in the Big 12, then you're getting your games showcased on the ESPN networks, ESPN2. If you're not on ESPN, you're on either of the Fox Sports networks, either on Fox itself or FS1. While compared to playing in the American, you're being played games on ESPNU, the CBS Sports Network, and you don't have a bunch of visibility. You're not really getting broadcasted to a huge national audience that's going to increase your fan base and increase your visibility in the eyes of recruits. Memphis getting denied despite willing to pay $200 million to get entrance into the Big 12 is not as surprising as what you may think, because the Big 12 has stabilized now. They just don't need to accept anybody just to stay afloat like how they did a few years ago. Now, if Memphis can't get into the Big 12, what's next for them? Because the ACC is not a feasible option because they're about to fall apart. Probably their best option would be getting into the Pac-12, which just aligned with some of the Mountain West schools. They lured them in. They also got a bunch of the better upper tier G5 programs as well. If Memphis can get into the Pac-12, that's probably their best chance to survive, because the Pac-12 is probably going to be the conference that gets the best of the best G5 programs that are available. And the Pac-12 itself, they won't be a Power 3 conference when we get the formation of College Football Super League, but at least it will be a conference to where those teams in it will be able to get a respective media rights deal. The teams that will have to share that among each other, it should be more than what the teams in the American are getting right now. And the Pac-12 still allows you to survive versus being in the current conference that you're in right now and just about to be on the verge of sinking underneath water with how it looks like the NCAA is just losing control over this sport. Eventually, the SEC, the Big Ten are going to branch off and they're going to do their own thing. And I don't think enough people realize how close we are to this happening. And that's why Memphis desperately wants to get in to a Power 4 conference, and that's why they were willing to pay $200 million to get into the Big 12, because the Big 12 was their only realistic opportunity of getting into a respectable power conference, because you know the Big 10 and the SEC are not going to take them, and the ACC is a ship that's about to sink, so there's no point in hopping on that wagon just to eventually drown when the rest of the conference goes under when FSU and Clemson leave. One of the most shocking moves of this offseason was when Jim Knowles left Penn State to become their defensive coordinator after being Ohio State's DC for the past couple of years, being one of the best, if not the best, defensive mind in the sport during his time in Columbus. And when Ryan Day made the decision to replace Jim Knowles with Matt Patricia to be his new defensive coordinator, it was a move that not only was surprising, but at the time, it didn't really make a lot of sense. But I got a theory as to why Ohio State felt comfortable making the transition to Matt Patricia at DC. And it's going to sound a little bit out there at first, but when you think of it, it makes tons of sense why Ryan Day wanted Matt Patricia to be his new defensive coordinator. Because when Michigan first started dominating Ohio State 4 years ago, they had Mike Macdonald as their new defensive coordinator at the time. And Mike Macdonald was an NFL level defensive coordinator. He did a really good job once he left Michigan to become the Ravens defensive coordinator, and he now is the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. And when Mike Macdonald left Michigan for Baltimore, who did they get to replace him? Jesse Mentor, who also is a NFL level defensive coordinator. And Jesse Mentor had some of the best defenses in all of college football during his time as Michigan's defensive coordinator, and he did a fantastic job calling the Chargers defense last year, which ranked second in points per game allowed, and his first season under Jim Harbaugh at the NFL level calling players on that side of the ball. And when Jim Harbaugh took Jesse Mentor with him to the NFL, when Sharon Moore got Michigan's head coaching job, who did he hire as his defensive coordinator? Wink Martindale, another NFL-level defensive coordinator who is one of the more respected defensive coordinators from the National Football League. And with these three defensive coordinators that Michigan has had over the last couple of years when they've dominated Ohio State, they've had a lot of success of slowing down Ryan Day's offense. They've given Ohio State's offense a bunch of fits. So now with Jim Knowles leaving to go to Penn State, Ryan Day felt it was the perfect opportunity for Ohio State to still play out of Michigan's playbook and get a NFL-level defensive coordinator of their own and Matt Patricia. And there are split opinions about Matt Patricia. He did a phenomenal job the majority of the years that he was the Patriots defensive coordinator under Bill Belichick. He coached some really fantastic defenses, but when he became the head coach of the Detroit Lions, his defenses were less to be desired. But some guys are just good as coordinators, and they're not cut out to be head coaches. Matt Patricia is one of those guys that he was good because of the supervision of Bill Belichick. And Ryan Day is a good enough coach that his defense is not going to go off the deep end because of Matt Patricia. Matt Patricia is a really bright and brilliant defensive mind. He knows how to run a bunch of different schemes, and he's going to be able to get the most out of a hybrid player like a Caleb Downs because he still runs a similar scheme with similar philosophies to what Bill Belichick does. And Bill Belichick loves defensive backs that have the kind of versatility that Caleb Downs have. You can play him in the slot. You can play him near the line of scrimmage. You can play him single high, two high. There's just so many different things that you can do with Caleb Downs in your defense. And with the kind of talent that Matt Patricia is going to be inheriting at Ohio State, is going to make him having a lot more easier of a time coaching up this side of the football because there's going to be a huge talent advantage that Ohio State's going to have just anyway with how well they recruit. So when you see Ryan Day hiring Matt Patricia, it wasn't a move that was made out of desperation. This was more of a calculated move that Ryan Day felt is going to help Ohio State turn the tables on Michigan again. Because Michigan has had three NFL-level defensive coordinators. Jim Knowles isn't really a NFL-style defensive coordinator. We've never really seen him coach defense in the NFL. We know that he's a good college defensive coordinator. So if there was ever a time for Ohio State to kind of pivot to something new and kind of get their feet wet on the NFL level of things, Matt Patricia was a really good addition to them. Because when you see the success that Michigan has had with these NFL-style defensive coordinators, Ryan Day gets an epiphany. He says, you know what? If they're going to beat us with this, we're going to use this as well to try to help start beating them again. So getting Matt Patricia was more so motivated by Michigan. Michigan influenced Ohio State to hire Matt Patricia because of the success that they've had with similar defensive coordinators from the NFL ranks that have been able to slow down this potent Ohio State offense. So Ohio State normally averages like 35, 40 points per game against most of the teams that they play against. When they go up against Michigan, though, their offense is not as effective because you're going up against some of the most brilliant minds that are able to kind of give Ohio State a little bit of fits because of their NFL backgrounds. And it took Michigan hiring a defensive coordinator with an NFL background for this rivalry to start shifting in their favor. Now Ohio State says, we're going to use the same thing that you used to dominate us for 4 years in a row, and we're going to get our own NFL guy. And that's why Ryan Day made the decision to hire Matt Patricia as his new defensive coordinator. As we already know by now, last season didn't go as expected for Carson Beck. Going into the 2024 college football season, he was a Heisman frontrunner. He was viewed as one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football, and his play tremendously dropped off last season compared to how we saw him play in 2023. And there were a bunch of reasons for why Carson Beck's play dropped off that wasn't necessarily all his fault. Georgia put a lot of games on the shoulders of Carson Beck. And when you are asking a guy to carry your team throwing the football, throwing the wide receivers that pretty much were so bad catching the ball, they might as well have moved the defensive back. Georgia led the nation and dropped passes last year. Their offensive line also had some injury problems that lowered the level of play that you normally see out of Georgia's offensive line. So the situation around Carson Beck is also what held him back, not necessarily himself not playing as good as what he did in years past. Then he gets scapegoated a lot for the way that Georgia's season went. But going to Miami, he has a chance to revive his career, being in a way better situation now than what he had in Georgia. Miami has one of the best offensive lines in college football going into this year. You have a really good group of wide receivers, and you got a really good 1-2 punch combo at running back. And Carson Beck is a really good quarterback when you're not asking him to carry a team to wins. It also helps that he has Shannon Dawson as his offensive coordinator, who's better than Mike Bobo. Shannon Dawson is one of the brightest offensive minds in college football. And when he left the University of Houston, that program completely fell off. So that shows you just how good and how impactful of a coach that Shannon Dawson is. And we saw Cam Ward come to Miami and become a first overall pick. Carson Beck has a situation where he can come to Miami and fix the damage that he did to his draft stock from last year, ball out, play good enough to get himself right back in the first round conversation, because the NFL draft is all about recency bias. People are going to forget all about 2024 if Carson Beck comes out and has the kind of season that he's capable of having for Miami. And Miami is keeping receipts of all of the Carson Beck haters right now, because with this situation that he's walking into, there's a really good chance that Carson Beck not only has a rebound season, but he can be as good this year as what he was expected to be last season. And I've seen Carson Beck play live. I went up against Carson Beck when I was playing high school ball when he was at Mandarin, and he's the best high school quarterback that I've ever seen live. He looked like the high school version of Tom Brady. He has a good enough arm that he can make all the throws. He throws with really good velocity as well. And he's more athletic than what you may think for a guy that's viewed more so as a drop back, traditional pro-style quarterback. And I've seen Mac Jones play live. In my freshman year, even though I didn't get in this game, it was the Jamboree. We seen Mac Jones when he was playing at Bowls, and he didn't really have that good as a game as what Carson Beck did. So Carson Beck, I've seen him play personally live in front of my eyes on the field, and that brother is an actual really good quarterback. And I have a bunch of homies that have played 7-on-7 with Carson Beck as well, and they all expect him to have a bounce-back season, because last year, the Carson Beck that we saw at Georgia was not the Carson Beck that we normally have grown accustomed to seeing from him out of high school and his first season starting at Georgia. And I really think that last year was more so due to Georgia not being as good as what they are usually, because they lost a lot of depth that they normally had because of NIL. They didn't want to pay to keep those depth guys around, and it hurt them really badly. And if you're in the SEC and you're asking a guy like Carson Beck to shoulder the load for you, having to overcome incompetent play calling, the offensive line play being inconsistent, and receivers that just had butterfingers for hands, what more do you want the brother to do? Now, the turnovers can definitely be improved. When Cam Ward was coming from Washington State to Miami, the biggest knock on him was that his turnovers were an issue. But when he got to Miami, though, his turnover numbers went down, and he was highly efficient because of the tutelage of Shannon Dawson. So playing for Shannon Dawson can do for Carson Beck what it did for Miami and get those turnover numbers down. And if you can overlook the turnover issues that Carson Beck had, which I know it's tough to do that because taking care of the football is part of what comes with playing the quarterback position, he was still really good. He threw for 28 touchdowns. His final 3 games in the regular season, he had no turnovers at all, including having a really good showing against Tennessee, who, by the way, had one of the best defenses in all of college football last year. So Carson Beck showed the ability to take care of the football and be a high-level efficient quarterback. And with this situation that he has in Miami, I feel he's going to be able to bounce back. And if Miami disappoints this season, it's not going to be because of Carson Beck. It's going to be because of what I've been saying all this offseason, Mario Cristobal. Mario Cristobal is the only thing stopping Miami from winning the ACC this year. If he can get out of his own way this year, and he truly has turned the table as a head coach as far as being better managing the clock, being better in late game decisions, then Miami, there's nothing stopping this program from winning the ACC and getting back to the mountaintop of college football. And if Carson Beck is able to win Miami their first ever ACC championship, he forever is going to be immortalized in the lore of Miami Hurricanes football, because he was able to do something that Cam Ward was unable to do. In spite of how great Cam Ward was, the defense held him back. Carson Beck, to say that I was the guy who helped bring back the U, who was able to bring Miami back to national prominence in college football, means everything. Rather, if his NFL career ends up being successful or not, it's something that he can look back upon, and every time he comes back to the University of Miami, he's viewed as a hero. So everybody that's hating on Carson Beck, Miami is keeping those receipts, because Carson Beck is going to be really good with the situation that he has in South Florida this year. And I know that he's made more headlines for his off-the-field incidents than what he has made for what's transpired on the field. But I feel everything that he's gone through personally is going to be motivation to further help him have this rebound season that he needs to propel himself back into that first-round conversation in the NFL draft. One of the most underrated transfer portal additions of this offseason that nobody is talking about, that's going to have huge implications on how the Big Ten is going to play out, is Dane Key transferring from Kentucky to Nebraska. I can't say this enough about how badly Dane Key was underutilized during his time at Kentucky. This was somebody that, coming out of high school in 2022, was the #1 player out of the state of Kentucky, and he was a huge pickup for the Wildcats. His dad also played for Kentucky as well, and the 3 seasons that he started at Kentucky, he was highly productive. This includes him setting a bunch of records as a true freshman. In his 3 seasons, he's been nothing short of spectacular. Last season, he led Kentucky in receiving yards, receptions, and this has inspired him having incredibly bad quarterback play. And during his 3 years at Kentucky, he has never really had a good quarterback, which is why he was criminally underutilized during his time there. Now transferring to Nebraska, which Dylan Raiola helped recruit him when he made his visit to Nebraska. Dylan Raiola was with him pretty much the entirety of that visit. And it was pretty obvious that Dylan Raiola wanted him to play for Nebraska, and he wants to throw passes to Dane Key, and for a very good reason. The guy is an incredible deep threat. He averaged over 15 yards per catch last season. He also is an incredible route runner as well, with really good hands, has really good ball skills. Dane Key is going to be instant offense for Nebraska this year. They haven't had a receiver this good since I don't really know when. But when you have somebody that creates this much separation on their routes, he's going to be somebody that's easily going to make life more easier for Dylan Raiola in his second season and third down situations, because it helps to have somebody that 75-80% of the time is going to be open, especially in crucial third down situations, to keep drives alive, because there was a pretty big gap between Dane Key and the rest of the receivers on Kentucky's offense last year. He pretty much doubled everybody in receptions and receiving yards. And the second best receiver, Bavian Brown, he was also criminally underutilized. He right now is at LSU at the moment. So getting Dane Key, I can't emphasize this enough, is one of the most underrated transfers of this offseason that nobody is talking about, because Dane Key has the potential of becoming arguably the best receiver in the Big Ten this year, not named Jeremiah Smith. He has the size, he has the route running, he has the ability after the catch, and he's going to be what Nebraska's offense lacked last year, which was a true number one wide receiver. They had some pretty good ones. You had Isaiah Nair, you had a few other guys who were pretty productive. You just had a rotation of guys, but you never really had anybody last year that you really could say, yeah, this is our go-to guy. Dane Key is going to be that wide receiver for you. And also, what should give you more confidence as a Nebraska fan that Dane Key is going to have a huge season for you is that the dude was highly productive for 3 years since his true freshman season against some of the best defenses in all of college football. The guy was going up against Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, some of the best defenses in college football. Dane Key had some really strong performances against. So for Dylan Raiola to get such an incredible playmaker like Dane Key is something that's going to help Nebraska have a huge season in year 3 under Matt Rule. And we already know what Matt Rule does. Everywhere he goes in his third seasons, his programs always take an incredible leap and improvement. He did it at Temple when he won 10 games in year 3 there. He did it at Baylor when he won the Big 12 championship and won 11 games that season before losing or leaving for the NFL. Having Dane Key changes a lot for Nebraska's offense. And if they're going to have a huge breakout season like most of us believe they will have, Dane Key is going to be a huge part of that. Don't be surprised if you see him become a first team, second team All-American, first team Big Ten selection. He's that kind of player. I don't think that enough folks understand how truly good Dane Key was. And the reason why I'm glazing this dude so much is because when I was covering Kentucky back in 2022, I felt they could be a huge sleeper team that season. And I was doing a lot of digging into the recruiting class. When they got Bavian Brown and Dane Key, it was, if not their best receiving class ever. So he follows his wide receiver coach from Kentucky to Nebraska as well. So that also was a huge decision in his process to transfer to the Cornhuskers. I just really like Dane Key. I've been following his career all throughout his time at Kentucky, and he was always really good anytime he was on the field. And for him to put up the numbers that he did with the atrocity that Kentucky had at quarterback last year, throwing out 3 quarterbacks, imagine what he's going to do with Dylan Raiola this year. I would not be surprised if he quickly becomes one of the best receivers in this conference, because he has that kind of ability. LSU's offense has a breakout player this year that should be banned from playing college football because he's an illegal weapon. And the guy that I'm talking about is second-year tight end Tradez Green, who is 6'7", 245 pounds, and runs 4.5. He was the second-rated tight end coming out of the 2024 recruiting cycle. And when I was watching LSU's bowl game this past season against Baylor, and I was watching Tradez Green, I was telling myself, this dude is like Kyle Pitts, but on crack. Not only can he play tight end, but he can also play receiver. And for all of you folks who are doubting if LSU is going to be able to live up to the hype because you don't believe in Brian Kelly, if you don't have any faith in Brian Kelly, have faith that LSU is going to be a national championship contender this year because of Tradez Green. Because how the hell can any defense game plan for this? How can you guard somebody that's 6'7", 245 pounds, running 4.5? He's a mismatch for most linebackers and safeties who are going to be guarding him when he plays tight end, because no safety has the kind of size that Tradez Green has. No linebackers have the kind of coverage ability to stick with this dude. And then when they line him out wide at receiver, how many defensive backs, how many corners truly have the coverage ability to deal with the kind of size, catch radius, and length that Tradez Green has? And what reminds me a lot of his game to Kyle Pitts is just how smooth he is when it comes to running routes. Normally when you see a guy of this size, they're more so just all athleticism. They don't really have a lot of technique in their game. They're not really that good running routes. Tradez Green is the complete opposite. I've never seen somebody this size, this fluid, and their movements, how smooth he is getting in and out of his cuts, how good he is after the catch. I don't know any defense that's going to be able to slow this dude down. Because how can you? He's 6'7", 245 pounds, can play both receiver and tight end. He's just a mismatch. No matter where you put him at on any part of the field, he is going to destroy you. All LSU literally has to do is throw it to Tradez Green on every single play, and I don't see how they don't go undefeated. If you are somebody that has played cornerback or defensive back, please tell me down in the comment section down below how you defend somebody like this. This guy is a freaking alien, and I didn't even really know about this dude until I turned on LSU's bowl game, and he was raising hell against Baylor, and I was just saying, boy, LSU is going to be a problem. They are. Because this dude can kill you down the field. He can kill you in the red zone like how he was doing against Baylor. And it's not just all because of size. What impresses me the most about Tradez Green is that the guy runs routes like he's a 5'10", 6-foot receiver with just the kind of athleticism and acceleration that he has getting in and out of his breaks. The guy is just too damn smooth to be this good. I mean, like, I don't know how the NCAA hasn't drug tested this guy, why he has been banned from this sport, because there's no way you can convince me. This guy is a sophomore. He's 19 years old, about to be 20, because with this kind of size that he has, this is a grown man playing a young man's sport at this point. And when I was watching Tradez Green's high school highlights, the guy was just a complete menace. The guy was just bullying every single body because, once again, it is incredibly difficult to stop somebody with this kind of size and athleticism. In some capacity, Tradez Green is somewhat what we all thought Arik Gilbert would have been. If you guys don't remember Arik Gilbert, really sad story. Had a really good true freshman campaign at LSU. He was kind of similar to Tradez Green, free tight end, had the ability to play receiver, and he transfers from LSU, and his career just went downhill from there. He right now is at a HBCU. I hope he can get right, but Tradez Green is what everybody thought Arik Gilbert could have been, and then some, because he just has so much size to where it's really, if you're an offensive coordinator, it's a dream to have this kind of a legal weapon on your offense like Tradez Green, because he is just a mismatch. No matter where he lines up at, you're not going to be able to stop this dude. Literally, all LSU has to do is just throw the ball to Tradez Green every play, and I don't see how he doesn't end up carrying this team to wins. If we are looking at some really deep Deep Heisman sleepers, I got Tradez Green on my list because I've never seen somebody like this ever before. And I've been watching football for going on 15 years now. And I can't recall anybody that's had this kind of skill set for this size who moves as fluidly as what Tradez Green does. I mean, good luck to any defense that goes up against LSU's offense this year. They got a lot to worry about. You got to worry about the speed of Barry Brown, Aaron Anderson. Then you got to worry about this 6'4", 245-pound illegal weapon. How are you stopping this? Seriously, how is anybody going to stop this?